Today we're going to talk about one of the topics that I currently have closest to my heart, and that has to do with being yourself, being your true self in English. And some of you might wonder, well, what does it have to do with how does being your true self contribute to anything in the betterment of language learning? And I can say a lot. Those of you that know me from before, and for those of you that don't, well, I hope that today you have a good experience. Those of us that have met before, you know that I, aside from being a teacher of English and an author of textbooks, and for those of you that are users, thank you very much. But for those of you that don't know me yet, I do experimentation with real kids to develop methodology. So I try to see where do I find the weakest links of the process of learning or teaching and learning English in order to develop or to add to the methodology that I support and publish, add those missing little things that will make our methodology even stronger. So I want to show you my latest work. And of course, everything comes out from the desired outcome that we want. Anybody in the world, young learners, which is my area of expertise, or grown-ups, everybody, whomever is in a classroom learning English, the reason why there's a desired outcome. See, we want to form students, and forming students has a couple of issues. It's not just as an individual or linguistically, but it is also of abilities that will allow this person to perform correctly in life. Whenever we speak our native language, it's the reason why we speak is because we want to communicate something. So performance is the, let's say, the high target of language speaking, and of course, therefore, of language learning. So the one thing we need to be careful about, and what makes the difference between somebody that learns English in the streets by, when I say in the streets, I mean because you live in a place where English is spoken and then you pick it up from your work or what have you, versus the way we teachers should be teaching it, is that we are talking about correct English. But, and there's always a but, as we know, based on lifelong holistic learning skills. We want to form a human being that is always learning. And maybe that's where Pearson got its mantra. It's Pearson, always learning, okay? So anyway, there are learning dimensions, and this is what makes it very interesting. Let me tell you that if you look of language learning and therefore teaching from a curricular point of view, from those of us that design curriculum, from those of us that write textbooks, we're always thinking of the main goal, which is the living skills, the goals that we pursue. And communication is on top of everything. For a purpose, we want people to be able to communicate what they need to say, what they want to say, not only what they can say. And that is the gap that we need to fill. So in other words, whenever someone speaks, there is a reason for saying something. We don't just speak out of cup. We speak for a reason. There is a purpose. There is a reason for saying it. So I call that, why say it? But then, why did I move it to the left? Well, there's a big reason, because nobody starts, or if you go to a classroom, this is not what they teach you immediately, because in order for you to be able to say things with a purpose, you need to know what to say, okay? So you see, it says why say it. It doesn't say what to say. So then we need to have linguistic competence developed. Curricularly speaking, and this is why the arrow points the other way, see? If we look at this as this picture, we start from the left, like the overall reason for learning, but we need to get into the nitty-gritty of what's happening in the classroom first, okay? And of course, that is the communication that we present our students with, using English correctly. I can never stress that enough, underline that enough. We, as professionals of language teaching, should be teaching correct English. And that shouldn't catch anyone by surprise. So that is the how to say it. So in the classroom, we are in charge of presenting our students with how to say it. But the reason why we want them to know how to say it is for the left side. because when they speak for a real purpose, they have to have a why saying it. So what's the problem? Well, that by the end of the 20th century, and yes, you can see by looking at me that I was already around in the 20th century, quite a while, by the way. Then at the end of the 20th century, we were doing this linguistic competence thing. And in the 21st century, we all were already prepared to discuss the why say it, the purpose, the intention, the performance in life and community. But then the question, remember I told you earlier that my job is to do experimentation to figure out, observe classes, entertain certain presentation of new strategies with kids to see now what? Where should we go to close the gap that exists between these two purple arrows, okay? And because we need to assure a solid link between the two of them. And I came up with a proposal. And of course, I believe that we can do it by adding a gap-filling dimension, which I have called personalization and customizing competences. So then, in order to make the flow more, let's say, meaningful and our teaching more reliable in terms of obtaining the results we want, we can do this by adding or making sure that there is a link there that is focused on communication reach, a growth in terms of being able to communicate. And of course, very importantly, that there is awareness, because awareness in the learning process is what makes learning a language modern in terms of today's correct ways of presenting or learning a language. So what would be our yellow statement? How to say it, why say it, what to say. This is a stage where a human being determines what to say. This means that they already must know how to say it. Okay, that's our job with them. But the student should be capable of selecting, of everything I'm capable of saying, of everything that I've been trained to say. What is the thing I am going to say? But then, with what purpose? That's the why say it. So I hope you can, let me explain a little bit more. See, the why say it is the purpose. The what to say is my selection based on my personalization of the possibilities. And then, of course, the core linguistic part is the correct way of saying it. So if we add these, then we can talk about what should be happening in our classrooms, which is like a spiral curriculum where we are recycling and coming back and going out and getting into the nitty-gritty, any gaps we find in the linguistic world. In order for this correspondence to happen, then, we must understand, and I will say a couple of things here, that the why say it is what makes our speech possibilities. Let me see what's going on here. There we go. The why say it is what makes it meaningful. In other words, useful in our daily lives, outside of our personal home or thoughts. The what to say is where I become relevant in the general context, what I contribute with to the general discourse, or if in my job, at school, if I'm capable of discussing. But so that would be called representative. I am making my presence valid. Count. This is where the individual counts as part of the overall community or professional living. But then the correct part is crucial, because I want to be represented appropriately in a meaningful context. I think it makes sense. Now, let's play a little bit with this, okay? So how is this supposed to happen? Because teachers will always want to know, I'm not going to say recipes of how to teach nicely, but wouldn't that be great? So what I want to say here is that teachers, okay, I buy into your general concept, but what's supposed to happen in the classroom? How am I supposed to teach? Well, let me move into that. We have different approaches to this. One of them that publishers love, and many teachers also like a lot, is the benchmark perspective, like the giving levels, like what belongs to this, what is supposed to happen to achieve this. And European, I'm going to say it, and Pearson is one of them, European publishers have sold very well the concept of levels of, oh, are you a beginner, or are you a starter, or are you a, and they have all these fancy names to differentiate themselves from others. But there are lots of benchmarks set out because of the European Union. When they started all these classifications and they wanted people to move from one country to the next and study, see, the philosophy behind the European Union is that you can go to high school in Spain and then go to college in France. And in order for that, you're French, or you can go to college in England, and your English is supposed to have certain benchmark. Okay, so we bought into that, and that's fine. But that is one way of pursuing what's supposed to, or of looking at what's supposed to happen in the classroom. But in reality, what we want to do is fill in a gap that is there. Okay, and call it what you might, want to pay attention to benchmarks or not. The thing is that you need a consistent achievement. You need fulfilled steps so that there is a strong outcome. That's what really matters here. So if I look at the personalization thing that I've been trying to sell into, or you buy into, then I want to focus on it, because later I'm going to put it together again, and we're going to look at classes with the whole thing working for us. So let's focus on this gap. I can identify a teaching process, and of course, every teaching process must have an outcome. So for instance, personalize, the first thing we want to do is that anything that we taught the competence for, okay, remember the beginning level where we actually learn correct English, okay, everything we do there, we move into the realm of personalization. So now, if the lesson talks about what do you want, what do you have you ever this, that's the linguistic competence. But now, hey, in my life, what do I want? Have I ever what? You see, we personalize. The problem, and we teachers well know this, is that we never have enough time, okay? So then my experimentation has taken me to get into deeper circumstances so that I can address those little huge concerns, okay? So for instance, when I personalize, this is the big open moment, what the students want. I just talked about traveling. So what do the students want? Where do they want to travel? I talked about food. What do they want to eat? Or what would they like to learn to say in English? But it's too ambitious, and not only ambitious in terms of time, but also in terms of the capability of students, because we have grading levels, remember? Okay, so then the next step is to customize that. So from what they want to what they can have. Doesn't that sound great? This is the way we train kids. Like, oh, you can want all the toys in the toy store, baby, but we're not going to buy everything because my credit card does have a limit, okay? So of all the toys you want today, let's see which ones you can have, okay? I know it's a funny analogy, but that's what it is. In the learning process, of everything that the students may suggest as, teacher, how do you say this? I want that. Regardless of whatever topic we are discussing or presenting, then we customize what is accessible to their English level, to the time we have, to their interest. So everything trickles down to customizing, but that's not it. After I customize, then I also want to define how is it that they can learn it, because there is a difference between what you can have based on what you know, based on the time we have, based on whatever, versus what can actually stick. And here we go to a very old principle, a Jean Piaget principle of accommodation. And what Jean Piaget taught us decades ago, but still going strong, is that a human being receives, because we have the same eyes, okay? We are looking at the same world out there, but only those things that I can accommodate to my prior knowledge, to my interest, to whatever it is that I can explain, understand, that's what sticks. So one of the reasons why teaching English to children is more dimensional than teaching English to a grown-up is that children are like a train in movement, while a grown-up is a train at the station. Okay, the kid's brain is always progressing, is always advancing in its potential. So when we teach a child, we have to make sure that we are teaching parallel in a way that we can hop in the train wherever it happens to be at that specific moment. Okay, so accommodation becomes more relevant, and accommodation here is making it theirs. How can we make what they can have? How much of what they can have can become theirs? Maybe if I go back to the credit card example, of all the toys I can afford buying the kid, which one really is, I'm not going to buy all of them. Which one really hits the target? Which is the one that they can play with? Do I have the space in the background? You see, all the considerations in language learning is, do the students have the space in terms of the place to click it in? Because prior knowledge, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. But is that the end of it? No, there's still space down there. Then we come to a point that is crucial, and that is that we have to culturalize. If I'm talking about toys, maybe in China, the toys that a kid would appreciate more are different than those that a child in Brazil, or a child in Argentina, or in Peru, or in Spain, or in Turkey, or in Mexico. So the point is that we have to culturalize everything we teach. Is the textbook that you use going to have that already? Not necessarily. For instance, I, as an author, write textbooks for the world. So I cannot presume, I cannot it's not a fact that a child in Africa is going to have the same choices as a child in Canada. No. So then I cannot go that deep. It is the teacher's guide that is supposed to instruct on how to go in every single different situation, how to go deep into the culturalization part. Because culturalizing is allowing the kids to be themselves with the language they just acquired. So this, my friends, turned into, I just brought it back into the world that we were presenting. So I want you to see the status. See, the current way, the status quo is that we have the other two, and I'm proposing a third one. And we already sort of have it already, especially if you're using my big English. And then from there, we move in, why is this changing directions? Well, because as I said earlier, we teach that way. We don't teach the opposite. From linguistic competence, we hope to go to life, but it isn't happening unless we do it through personalization. And that is not Batman. That is an invitation to understand that it is connected both ways. So how is this updated? Well, it works, it interacts both ways. So these three things, I'm just changing the scenario so that we can start practicing as much practice as we might be entitled to doing while we are thousands of miles and kilometers away. Now, so there they are, living skills, living goals, personalization and customizing competences, linguistic. Notice that the middle one, that's the one I highlight more because that is what our session today is based on. How do I enrich this central part that will allow my linguistic competence teaching to grow into life skills? Okay? And of course, remember that the theme of all these webinars is confidence. Okay, so I was holding the link until now. I was asked to talk about something from my corner of how I see methodology and how I've been successful as an author in the world. That how do I identify this pursuance of confidence in the learner? And here it is. Okay, in order for us to have a confident learner, we need him to feel backed up. Just like when you have a team, and how do the players feel okay with what's going on out in the stadium? They feel backed up by a good team, by good co-players, okay? Well, in learning, it's a process. And if the student feels that he is shaky, if I may, weak in the ability of representing him or herself when performing, then we have a problem of confidence, of lack of confidence. So you see, it matches perfectly. This personalization and customizing matches the need for developing, building good confidence in our learners so that the English they learn sticks. So let me move it up a bit so I can start presenting examples before my time keeps flying away. One of the categories is English language teaching gap filling. And the gap, of course, as you can see, is this middle one. So for instance, assessment. Ever since I'm going to say mid-90s, we started talking of assessment as a consolidation process when we started walking away. And for those of you that are very young, this might, it's not going to be a surprise, but it's good that you figure out where all this is coming from. In the mid-90s, we finally hit learner-centered things. We finally hit cognitivism, finally mainstreamed into language learning. And with that, we realized that evaluation was very poor. See, we had evaluation was a test, okay? And of course, now that isn't that the case. Well, when that started happening was in the mid-90s, when instead of evaluation, we talked about assessing, which included tests, interviews, just observation, mere observation, students' performance, and so on and so forth. So then you see there is no assessment in the middle. So to jump this, so this is why there's a gap. It's too long a leap. And therefore, when you assess so remember look at these columns as where they are under, okay, with a so there are two assessments here. One of them is under linguistic competence. Well, there you ask a grammar question, and if it's a past tense and the student uses did, done. But in life, maybe this engineer or this college student that needs to present is not performing appropriately, is not able to, so the assessment is very poor, okay? Now, if we create an assessment, an intermediate assessment, then the leap is shorter and therefore more solid. Therefore, the student arrives in society, arrives in living goals with a stronger confidence. You see how this connects to the overall theme of the conference series? So anyway, this is a visual formula. Those of you that know me know that I specialize in young learners from 3 to 15. And although what I work with applies to grown-ups too, my main focus are young learners. And therefore, I have learned that showing is better than just saying. Okay, so if you don't need to see that this is a form, these little lines, I apologize, but I am used to showing things, okay? So then there you have it. It's a visual representation. And this is what we use for benchmarks, rating, and even those famous certificates that parents are crazy about and everybody wants. Then we have a category. I'm going to show you as well another category. That was the intermediate one, the one where you put in something in the middle to make it a strong bridge. Now, there is another category, and that is the ones that start like in spiral. So for instance, there is something that we call metacognitive awareness, which is to be aware that you think, not just to think and say something. See? Awareness is when you think and say something. Metacognitive is when you think of the thinking, okay? When the mental process is part of the issue, and it's wonderful, okay? And we started this in the 2000s as well. So there we have it, 3 places. But the problem is that when we do the linguistic part of the teaching, there is no such thing as linguistic awareness. So that's why I put that visual flat, okay? Now, when we do metacognitive awareness, then we can get stronger if we do it with the personalization process. When the students are learning to represent themselves in English, to express their opinions, their wishes, their interests, their desires, then there are metacognitive possibilities there, because the student can think of why they're coming to this choice, okay, or to want to say this instead of that. But that, my friends, gets even stronger when the person is out and about, either as a student, but now being able to make presentations, to argue, to defend a point of view in life, or in a student life, or in a professional scenario. It gets even bigger, because then in order to defend their thoughts, there's a rationale behind it. And imagine when a human being can express in English, not the thing, but the mental process for which or by which they can defend their opinion, their interest, their wish, their desire. Wow. Okay. And this, my friends, is the reason why those students come to us. This is why they want to learn English, not to be asked, how do you say this? Or respond to a flashcard. No, because they want to be themselves in English, both in life, which is our central, as a person, as their interests, their self-analysis, and also in their performance in society. And that is what we should pursue. So then I'm going to show you a little example of this, just to serve as a case in point of what I just said. In writing, for instance, when we do linguistic competence, we teach process writing. If you are a user of my books, you know that in Big English, we have pre-writing, writing, revising, presenting. And of course, that is a good scope. That is the way to go. But as you move on to higher purposes, then this expands into composition. Now it is not just the revise that there is an adjective if your paragraph is descriptive, or check to see if you have punctuation. No, now it's a purpose for composition. Like and this is the personal thing. I want to write about my country. I'm going to write a composition about my favorite TV shows, whatever goes with the person. And I can go, remember the 4 steps all down to culturalizing. So all that is happening. But in society, in life, very few jobs are going to ask you for a composition unless you are a professional in, I don't know, an editor or something. If you work for a newspaper, or your students are going to target journalism, or are going to be authors. But if your students are going to be college students, they need to get involved with everything. And you do it in English, or they're going to be a lawyer somewhere, then they're going to need to move into documents. See, from process to composition to documents. What do I mean by documents? A will is a document. See, any writing that has a specific purpose of natural use is a document. Even a letter is a document that should be done in a composition format, or that we learn the skills to write a letter, but it is a document. It's going to be filed somewhere. A petition, there is the difference between a letter to say, hi, grandma, versus, well, nobody does that anymore, FaceTime, but a letter that is that petitioning something for your community. All those things are documents. So it's a very broad word, a little bit dry if you want, but it is what it is. It's a document. Okay. So then moving on, then we have then imagine this. If we don't teach this intermediate stage, there are some skills that never arrive, that students never get. Let me show you an example. See, the empathy with the topic of study is crucial, but from linguistic competence, because it doesn't exist, there is nothing in linguistic competence that is aiming at developing empathy with the topic of study. It can only happen if we do it when we are in the personalization stage. Why? Because empathy comes from within. I am happy, or I am interested, or I find myself identified with, but it is I. It is not the language. It is I. It is the student. It is the person. Therefore, imagine this. Today, people that do what I do are putting a lot of weight on methodology, on developing an empathy with the topic of study. If you have the time, read about design learning, and you'll see a lot of that stuff. And I have a presentation on that. We can talk about that some other time, if we are invited back. Anyway, empathy does not exist in linguistic competence, but it can start if we do the personalization, so that when the human being gets to life, they can have empathy with what they are doing, saying in English. Whatever topic they can have more passion for explaining, for discussing, for arguing, for supporting something. for presenting a project in their offices or some research that they do in school. Okay. Now, another example is scaffolding. We have learned that scaffolding is important in construction because that supports. Now, in learning, this is crucial because there's always this thing about a learner who at the same time is learning the language, is already in a scenario of using the language. And that, my friends, is wonderful. Because students are using the language, but they are learning it, so they need help. They need this. What the concept of scaffolding has to do, like when an orange tree has very heavy oranges, or an apple tree is a better example. And then somebody has to go and put some pole under the branch until they pick up those apples. Then this is the way we should think of scaffolding in language learning. So then, from the ability of constructing the language, I'm going to say correctly, to the ability of using English in a natural way, wow, there's a gap. And that gap will not be, natural speech, in other words, will not be possible if we skip from language construction abilities to pretend that there's going to be natural speech. It just won't happen. If we do language construction attached to guided speech, in other words, you're going to be talking about you, but the process, the structures you're going to be using are going to be exactly the ones that I presented in the language construction scenario. Then I'm putting this little pole that I was talking about. I'm supporting you. I'm picking you up with the presence of a structure that you have already practiced. And now you are being yourself, using that so that you mature it enough so that then you can go out and use it in natural speech. So what this does is that it is solid if I go through guided speech, and then it is very difficult unless, my friends, please look at the visual here. Look what's going to happen. It is possible, but how can I create this connection? This is like when somebody is building a house and they're only going to build one floor, one story, and you tell the builder will ask you, sir, would you be interested in the future of adding a second floor to your house? Because if you do, you don't have to do it now. But if you do if that's in your plans, you need to know now because the foundation has to be different of this first floor. Same thing when we teach English. Even if you're still in the language construction part, if your target is an individual who you expect to use English in natural speech, then what needs to happen, my friends, is that you need to make sure that there is lots and lots of practice when you are doing the construction part, so that the students can get to presentation and discussion through the stage of a connection between the language you're teaching or learning with the life you are living. This linkage is the one that allows language construction to become natural speech in the future. And so I like to play around with things. So here we have the guy starting the construction. And then if we do enough practice, language construction becomes solid. It becomes good for the future, good for the other intentions we have. And then, of course, if we do guided speech, if we take our students to speaking, but using the models of the language we had, then that was good because then we have a solid basis for the ability of students to connect their doings, if I may, their practices of presentation or their life presenting, discussing, and they can do it following in a more natural speech format. And that is the target. So enough been said. When do we start doing this? Well, my philosophy, my mantra is the earlier, the better. And of course, it comes from an author of textbooks for kindergarten and primary. So this might be self-serving to a certain extent, and I'm an honest man. But it has been proven that the younger, the better, especially because students see the language in a more natural way. And hey, we want that in the end. So what does the world do? although there are countries that start at age 2, but we basically think of 3. Okay, so 3 to 6, a kindergarten, lower primary, excuse me, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, the upper primary, junior high school, 12 to 15, high school, 15 to 18, and then of course, college and life, 18 plus. And I purposefully, on purpose, I say college and life, because many people don't go to college and they still need to speak English. And people that do still need to use English in a natural way to be part of a richer experience of university, okay? I know that in some of your countries, you don't call it college, you call it just university. In the United States, we call it both things. You go to college, and that college is part of a university. Okay, so then here we go. Here are our usual suspects, well, from previously. Linguistic competence, personalization and customizing competences, living goals. Now, I want you to see what I'm about to do, because this transparency took a lot of time to design. I want you to see what I'm doing here. Why do we have those different shades of purple? Because of the last arrow at the top, the curricular focus. See, we're going to deal with 4 different focus levels. We're going to deal with 4 different focus levels. The darker, the more. Major, standard, basic, and of course, minor. And now I want you to look at the column that I have shown you. And the column that I have shown you, or that I'm showing you now, has a darker presence of linguistic competence, and then it starts slightly fading into standard when it comes to personalization, and then we have very light, very minor presence when it comes to life, because these kids are in kindergarten. As they move through the learning of English, notice what's happening. Little by little, and this is done through experimentation with real students, little by little, the major, whatever is highlighted as major, and this is an example of curricular design, and that I have a degree in curricular. I'm a teacher like everybody else here, and I am an author, but I went to college 3 times, okay? And the second time, I went to get a degree on general pedagogy, methodology, because I was very interested in the development of curriculum. So this comes from that background, okay? So then notice how linguistic competence starts fading out, because allegedly, and I cannot underline that enough, allegedly, because we present English in a total first time, or in total a first time, because it's spiral, so we present English several times in life. But the first passing through English is supposed to be done by the age of 12. This is why in the 6th grade, we teach things like, have you ever visited, or did you ever, because that is like the highest structure of English. And of course, that means that when the child finishes 6th grade, he or she should have already visited overall the language once. Okay, so then by age, if you are teaching correctly, if your school is starting early, then by age 12, the students have had a vision, they have a perception of English in global. Now, of course, it is limited because they are only 12. I just said minutes ago that the students are trains in movement. So they're still moving as a train when they're 12. So, but at least they have a picture of what English is. Therefore, little by little, these start moving out, the linguistic competence, and personalization kicks in. And notice that personalization is ever present all through life. But as you go into junior high school, particularly high school and university, you notice that living skills, living goals are very strong. And in the end, they are the strongest presence in the curriculum. Why? Because by then we want the human being to be a learner, but also to be a user with natural speech in a conscious, in a self-awareness way. And that, my friends, this is why I love this transparency. And I know it sounds like tooting my own tune because I did it, but this is my favorite transparency because it gives us a clear picture of the presence of curricular intents as we teach, okay, throughout this year. Now, if we do some gap filling, remember that I was talking about. So for instance, we present in, let me summarize this before we move into examples, and let me see how we're doing in time. We have 20 minutes. Language, see, under the linguistic competence, what do we teach? Well, in order to achieve good linguistic competence, we teach vocabulary models, language models, sorry, grammar, okay, syntax, vocabulary recycling. This means that we are using different ins and outs so the students can practice more words and incorporate new stuff. But in life, we want what I call story reading is also very academically described, but it could be in life that a student is reading a brochure, okay, for something, that a device that they just bought in the office or at home, and they have to read them the manuals, okay, and so it's not story reading, it's reading per se. It could be academic reading as well. So when you speak a language, see, all of us have a native language, regardless of which it is. And even in our native language, we learn new words every day. I'm not saying that they stick to us. Remember the principle of accommodation? If I'm reading a novel, and the author, being someone that knows more about literature than I do, throws in a couple of Sunday words, okay, I might be interested to look them up and see the meaning, but because it's not my world, then my accommodation is not going to happen. I might have to go back and find the word again when I remember that there is such a word. It's not going to, remember, see, this is why everything here makes sense, because it connects, everything is connected to everything. So then remember I was talking about Piaget's accommodation. Well, if I read something, what do we do when we see a manual for a new computer? An instructions guide. Well, we go to the dictionary 100 times because it's a world that we don't belong to that world. We just bought that thing, okay? And therefore, there is no accommodation possible. But little by little, we start adding words to our accommodating possibilities. Now the same arrow history from before. See, we need an intermediate stage to transfer and accommodate, as I was just saying. And therefore, it becomes a little Batman there, because we are talking about the flow of going back to linguistics, a process of activities that transfer, that allow accommodation, and then, of course, enriching, extending, expanding. Now, having said that, why am I coming back to my favorite chart? Because now we're going to use the rest of our remainder time to look at cases, okay, to look at activities. If we work together in a meeting hall, I would be practicing this. So remember linguistic competence, living goals, personalization, curricular focus. Well, this is just for you to review. I already explained this. So let's take the first one. Okay, and remember, well, before we take the first one, we're going to just to see it in the same place. Grammar, meaning comprehension, fluency and intonation, literacy. What we target when we do linguistic competence are those four things. We want to make sure that the student knows how to read. We want to know that the student can use the correct syntax, the flow, understands the flow, because English is a very particular language. It is not a Romance language like Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. It is not, so it is a language that doesn't travel well to most of the languages spoken by those that are learning English, okay? So we need to make sure that grammar, the flow, the syntactical part is understood. Meaning comprehension, crucial. Do not do anything if you're not sure that meaning is getting across. Fluency, because we don't want people to be stumbling. Are they supposed to be completely fluent like we are here today? No. But the intonation and the fluency should be good enough for meaning to be able, for this learning, or no, for the intervention to be meaningful. And then literacy, because we need to know, the students need to know how to read and write this English language that they are studying. Now, the personalization, remember the four stages: personalize, customize, accommodate, and yes, you guessed it, culturalize. But what about the upper? I have not talked about that in terms of the performance in society. Well, information. When a learner already has enough control of English, or when a learner has English enough control enough control to be capable of doing research in English. And when I say research, I'm not talking about Einstein. No. I'm talking about us. He or she is assigned something, and you can go online and feel comfortable collecting data. That's the information I'm talking about. The research I'm talking about, not the research of having to throw in a paper 2 years from now and have it published in some scientific magazine. No, just the everyday run-of-the-mill information that you need to look up, find, consolidate, register, talk about. And then, of course, this means that there's going to be content enrichment. Whatever we are facing enriches through our information gathering. Makes sense, right? But then what do you do with that information? Just file it? No. You want to talk about it. You want to perform with it. Now, the word performance, I want to tell you now, has two different uses in this methodology, or in this proposal. It should be performance as the engineer talking to the people that report to him, or the lawyer presenting a case in front of a judge, or a co-worker presenting where the boss is also there in a meeting, okay? Or in college, a team of students standing in front of the rest of their class and presenting or discussing or whatever it is. That's performance, one case. But with the little ones, performance is also the standing up and doing something like acting, like role playing. That's also a performance. It's the use. So in other words, let's take the word performance in the broader sense. When you stand up and say something in English for a purpose, okay? Now, let me focus on the 3 to 6 and see how far we can get. This is going to be the literacy reading conversation thing. So there we go. Notice this is kindergarten, and what you can see is grammar, meaning, fluency, literacy. The students here are going to face 2 grammatical points. And this one, where is mom? She's in the kitchen. To enrich this, to bring in more stuff, then we have a column of picture, like a picture dictionary that we call that. If you look, so this is the how to say it. We are presenting the format of the language, meaning comprehension, fluency, but of course the grammar point. So look at this case here, same story, different topic. Where is baby? He's crawling up the stairs. Now we have the gerund, the present progressive. But what you want basically is to know, to practice how to say it. Remember that we need to have a lot of practice. The more practice, the better. And of course, then we focus on vocabulary for fluency, for meaning, for putting in, to have more elements of speech, as I like to say. And I'm going to move fast because time. See, even for the literacy part, we teach phonics, okay? And we're talking 3 to 6. We start with little simple things. By the time the kids are 5-year-olds, they know that nurse is different from nest and is different from 9, but all 3 share that sound, as opposed to lion, which does have it, but at the end of the word, that kind of thing. Then, my friends, because that would be the reading part. But what about the writing part? Because literacy is both reading and writing, as we well know. So then the tracing, the basic things that when we teach a native speaker to read and write, the beauty here is that we're not teaching a native speaker, we're teaching a learner of the language, but simultaneously, we are teaching them phonics exactly the same way we teach kids in the United States, okay? Which is a wonderful thing. Now, and it goes on. Now, let's move up a bit, and now we're gonna go into how to say it. So we're still moving with the how to say it with the grammar point, but now it's a storybook. So there is reading involved, but focusing, using models of the same grammar. Remember the guided conversation thing that I discussed earlier? Well, there you have it. And now, my friends, it's time to move into personalization. And personalization, what to say, okay? So here we go. Remember I told you about experiment? Well, I was with a group of kids, and there was a little girl named Cindy, part of it, and I chose her as the example that I was going to show you for, there's a reason, and you'll see it you'll see it stand out. Cindy, I asked them to draw their house, but this is a very peculiar house. Have you ever seen a house that is exactly 4 rooms like that? No, there's a reason why it turned out like that. Remember the steps of the personalization? So the first category of the 4 that you might recall is draw your house. But before Cindy and her classmates drew, I went to customize. Stage 2. Draw your 4 favorite rooms of your house. See, I was considering time. I wasn't going to stand there for hours. I didn't have hours, okay? So draw your favorite 4 rooms, and these were the pick for Cindy, and I can sort of figure them out, because one of them is obviously the kitchen with the dining room, the table there. The other one is the bed. So the only one I had concern about was the first one, but I think it's a bedroom. I took it as a bedroom because that was the only one that could serve as a bedroom, because the other one is obviously a coffee table there, so it's the living room. Yeah, Cindy later told me, yeah, this is my bedroom, this is my kitchen, this is that. Okay. Now remember that was just a customized, but to accommodate, I have to go to what Cindy and her classmates could have as background, okay, and could be interested in. So I said, what rooms are they? And this is where Cindy told us that is her bedroom, okay? Can you name them? Yeah, sure. Bedroom, kitchen, living room, and what have you. And then, of course, what do you do in the kitchen? What do you do in the bedroom? What do you do? What do you put in the closet? Do you have stairs? So you see, we have the kitchen first, the dining room, the living room, and the bedroom. Those were the choices: kitchen, dining room, living room, and bedroom. Now, what I still have one missing, and it becomes the most interesting one. Remember, I told you that after we accommodate, in other words, we only what is possible that they can make theirs, then would be the desirable ones, the ones that make them be themselves. And of course, that was a stage that I call culturalize. So notice how this had a twist. Now I'm saying, do you eat in your kitchen or in the dining? Because I, for one, oh, am I good at putting my food on a tray and going to the TV room, which was not of the 4 that Cindy chose here. If I had to choose 4, I would probably go with the TV room before anything else, okay? And I would have a tray and I would be eating supper there. I would be having dinner or, coffee in the morning. And that is my choice. That is me. So I need to be able to answer things like, do you eat in your kitchen or in the dining room? And I would say neither. Teacher, how do you say neither in English? Okay. What do you like to eat? Who cooks? Because in some countries, mommy cooks, but in some countries, it really isn't distinguishable, because it could be daddy, it could be my older sister, it could be me, it could be whomever. Well, hopefully not the kindergarten kid. What do you drink with your food? This was a shocker, because I remember that in Mexico, almost every kid says that they drink with Coke, because it's a society that loves Coca-Cola, and they pair it with food in a way that when they don't drink it with food, like a lot of people would never eat a dinner with orange juice as their liquid. But in South America, and I'm not sure if in Asia, but in South America, kids do. I remember in Colombia, a child telling me that he ate lunch with some kind of juices, which in some countries would be a no-no. So you see, this is why it's important that we culturalize. Do you have a pet? What is it? What's your pet's name? Does your pet live inside or outside of your house? Do you have a closet? What do you have in your closet? So you see, we are talking about personalizing, but culturalizing as well. And this is what makes it valid, what allows a human being to have something to say as in their life, as opposed to what do you remember from the classroom. And this is crucial. So now let's move. Now we're getting, that was just the intermediate stage. So what do we do for information purposes? Well, why say it? Well, remember that I told you that performance is different? Well, with kids, this is going to be a little bit of acting, a little bit of representation. They're only in kindergarten. So they're going to be jumping around a little bit like musical chairs. And if they're hopping around and they stop in bedroom, well, they're going to describe their bedroom, what they do in their bedroom, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. It's going to be fun, and they're going to be communicating in reality. Now, before I go to another example, I want to introduce it, and that would be progressive. And for reading, we have phonics, we have meaning comprehension, we have fluency, we have grammar. Remember those? But in the other end, the outcome we want is information. We want content enrichment. So in order for that to be possible, in the middle, we need to do CLIL. Now, everybody attending for the benefit of all of us, all 600 of you should be already doing CLIL. I beg of you. What is CLIL? Well, we know that it stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning. And this is where this stepping stone applies, because what we're doing is stopping over. Before we move into students reading a college book or a bilingual, in a bilingual scenario, it happens in primary, in elementary, that they're using the same book. Some students in bilingual schools are using the same science book that we use in the United States with native speakers. So then the intermediate stage to make that possible is to learn content in English, just like we do in life. But that is, I coined a verb that would be to ELTIze. Everything that exists in reality can be ELTized in a way that the student has this stepping stone, this scaffold that I was talking about earlier, and then we can move in. So that's what we do it. Now, show an example, remember this? Well, let's look at this progressive thing reading. And now we're gonna move on to lower primary. And oh my God, we're running out of time, okay? So then we have that, and we have, for instance, content here. So it's CLIL, it's this ELTizing situation where the students will be able how to say it, progressive interventions, reading, and it moves on to progressive ELT. And basically what we're doing here, we have content words. And what I want to show you is that we can personalize by moving to the students' lives. Do you like art? Do you have a favorite work of art? Whatever. And then when we move on to the personalization, what other creative jobs do you know? What other things can you think of, so that we move it to their life out in the streets? See, it saddens me that we're running out of time. So I'm going to steal. I have 3 minutes plus the ones that I'm going to steal because I want to show you something. When it comes to reading and to the acting part, I'm going to go directly to writing and how I did this. And I hope you can indulge me with 2 minutes after, because what we have here is the creativity. We took a story that was already there, okay? And so that's where we dealt with the grammar, the meaning, the fluency, whatever. And then from there, we checked the pre-writing. I wonder, all the answers possible. So we did the pre-writing, the writing, the revising here. And as we did this, then we moved on to personalize. And to personalize, the students came up with their own fairy tale. But we took as a master the what to say. They chose a fairy tale. And the example I'm going to show you is the one about the pea on the pot and what to say in writing. So then my students, the thing I just showed you, this is the ELTizing of the real story. So in 2021, I ELTized Hans Christian Andersen's famous fairy tale. And then from that, we turned it into something with characters, the prince, the princess, the king, the queen, the narrator, locations. And because we're not together, I want to finish this by showing you what you would be doing in real life if I had my hands on you, okay? But I knew I wasn't going to. So the best thing is to show you what it would look like. So ready? Indulge me for a couple of minutes. Here we go, my friends.
Once upon a time, there was a prince who wanted to marry a princess, but she would have to be a real princess. He traveled all over the world to find one, but he couldn't find one. There were a lot of princesses, but it wasn't easy to find out if they were real ones. There was always something about them that was not right. I'm sad because I can't find a real princess. I better go home. Evening, terrible storm came, and there was thunder and lightning, and the rain poured down heavily. Suddenly, someone knocked at the gate, and the old king went to open it. Hello, my dear. How can I help you? Your Majesty, sorry to bother you. I am Princess Mary from the Kingdom of Pearson, but because of the storm, I can't go back to my palace. May you find it in your heart to let me stay here for the night? Of course, my dear. So, you are a real princess? But look at you. She didn't look well. The water ran down from her hair and clothes. She was all soaked. Come in, my dear. Let's talk to the queen. This young lady says she is the Princess of Pearson and that she needs to stay the night here at the palace. Oh, my lord, come, my dear. Let me see that you get a comfortable bed. We'll soon find out if she is a real princess or not. The queen said nothing more. She went into the bedroom, took all the bedding off the bedstead, and put a pea on the bottom. Then she took 20 mattresses and laid them on the pea, and then laid 20 comforters on top of the mattresses. Your bed is ready, my dear. You may rest now. I'm sure you'll be well in the morning. Good night. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will rest now. Good night. The king, queen, and prince are talking and having breakfast in the dining room. And I put 20 mattresses and 20 comforters on top of a pea, and the princess, still looking tired, enters, interrupting the queen. Everybody greets her. Good morning, dear. Did you have a good rest last night? Oh, Your Majesty, I had a very bad night. I slept very little. Heaven only knows what was in the bed, but I felt something hard, so all my body hurts. It's horrible. Now I know she is a real princess because she felt the pea right through the 20 mattresses and the 20 comforters. Nobody but a real princess could be as sensitive as that. I can't let her go. I will ask her to marry me. They are all at the palace hall saying their goodbyes. The king walks to the gate to call a carriage. The queen stays in the hall while the prince and the princess walk to the gate to wait for the carriage. Princess Mary, I know we just met, but I have been looking for a real princess many years. Will you make me the happiest man in all of the 7 kingdoms? Will you marry me? Oh my God, I will ask my father, but I'm sure he'll say yes.
Dun, 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 dun.
I hope so. Please have a safe trip home. I will be waiting for the good news. One month later, they were all in the kingdom's cathedral, excited with the wedding of the century. The prince and the princess got married. The people from both their kingdoms attended in joy. It was a beautiful wedding. After the ceremony, the royal couple walked to the public square and all the people cheered them. After they returned from their wedding trip,
They went looking for the pea that had helped the prince find a real princess to marry. The pea is now at the kingdom's museum, and thousands of subjects go see it every year. They want to see the small, insignificant legume that helped their prince find true love. The end. There you have it. Okay, so just to wrap things up, and I know I want to thank you very much for attending today, and I do have an announcement to make. First, I would like to tell you that if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. It's right there on the screen, mario.herrera@pearson.com. Any questions about anything that I said that you might think that an answer to that would help you out, just write me an email. I'm more than happy to be in direct contact with you and to keep a conversation going. If you are on Twitter, please join me at MarioELT. And of course, on behalf of Pearson, I want to tell you that at the end of the session, you're going to find a link to go to a survey. And when the survey will also lead you to receiving your printable diploma for today. And if you are in mainland China, then Pearson will be able to email you your diploma. So it's either, if you're not in China, you can stay right now until you answer the survey, which is very brief, and then you will get a link to print your own diploma. If you are in mainland China, just remember that Pearson will email you your diploma. Thank you very much for everything, and I wish I see you around. I can't wait to go to your countries and meet face to face and have the fun that we always have. Until then, thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves, okay? Love you. Bye-bye.